real ones. Welcome back to the Real Relationship Podcast, where we're bringing the real back to relationships.
Yes, sir.
I'm Asha Steele.
And I'm Devin Steele.
And we're so excited that you guys are tuning in today with us.
Yeah, man. We're really excited that you guys are tuning in today because we have a very special guest in the building. Now, look, this man doesn't need an introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway. Today's special guest is none other than DeVon Franklin. DeVon is an award-winning film producer, New York Times best-selling author, and motivational speaker, and he is committed to uplifting the masses through entertainment. Variety magazine named him one of the top 10 producers to watch. Ebony magazine has distinguished him as one of the top 100 African Americans in America, and Oprah has called him a bona fide dynamo, a different kind of spiritual teacher for our times. DeVon serves as president and CEO of Franklin Entertainment, a dynamic multimedia entertainment company with a first-look film deal at Paramount Pictures, a second-look film deal with Netflix, and an overall deal at CBS TV Studios. Along with his work as a producer, he is also the author of multiple best-selling books, including The Truth About Men, which we're going to dive in today about. So fellas, make sure you strapped in because it's going to be a crazy ride. The Success Commandments, The Weight, which he co-authored with his wife and actress Megan Good, which we're also going to dive in today about, and Produced by Faith. Now look, I know this man would advise y'all to wait, but we won't keep y'all waiting any longer. Ladies and gentlemen, DeVon Franklin, welcome to the Real Relationship Podcast.
Thank you.
I'm honored to be here.
So before we go into depth discussing some of the principles you talk about in your book, I first wanted to ask the question, what motivated you to discuss love and relationships when that's usually a topic men shy away from?
That's a good question. You know, it just was organic. I mean, there was no reason behind it. People just started asking me questions and I just organically started answering them. And then that kind of led to, Megan and I writing our first book. And it was just something that just came naturally. I didn't have a real agenda other than to help. That was the biggest agenda, was like, where love and relationships is so hard. It's so difficult, but, I was like, look, let me do everything I can just to be a positive, hopefully, positive force in all of this by just providing a perspective, because in relationships and dating, man, it can get real crazy quick. Yeah. So I just felt like as a man, I had to say something, and those that listen, great. Those that don't, hey, that's just the way it goes.
And it's crazy because I feel like we're seeing a shift in the world where a lot of men are stepping up. A lot of men are holding each other accountable and just wanting to become, better partners. On this podcast, a lot of, men reach out to us. They send us messages and they tell us that they just want to be better husbands. They want to be better lovers, but they really just don't know how. And one of the reasons why I liked your book, The Truth About Men, is that you basically give men a playbook on how to become better men, how to become better lovers. And in that book, you talked about two things. You talked about the dog and the master. Can you touch on those principles?
Yeah. So, with The Truth About Men, I really had to kind of unpack what most men struggle with that people don't talk about. And so I talk about this idea that every man struggles between love and lust. Mm-hmm. I call love, in The Truth About Men, I call love the master. I call lust the dog. Mm-hmm. And in order for us to be the men that we were called to be, we have to learn how to master the dog within. And, I'm not saying that we as men are dogs. Clearly we're not, but we do have to master that dog. We have to put love over lust. We have to work on it. And too often I feel like men, we don't do our work. We don't really do our work. We don't take time to acknowledge these things are there. We know they're there because we know, the thoughts that we may have and the feelings we may have. But we don't always know what to do with it. And I think that for women, women sometimes are misunderstand us as men. As men, why we were created this way, I don't know. Let's ask God when we get to heaven and say, Lord, why did you do this? Okay, because I don't know. But women sometimes, in my experience, what happens is that they want to buy into this idea that once a man gets married and falls in love, that, oh, that's it. I'm everything to this man. It's just not true. Right. It's not true. And just because it's not true, it's not a reflection that the man doesn't love you at all. It's just that every man wrestles with this dog. And I wanted to write the truth about men to say, okay, look, here's how we do it. We have to acknowledge, we can't suppress, we have to use discipline, we have to use communication, we have to create boundaries, we have to do all of these things as men so that that dog does not run and then ruin our life. And unfortunately, we keep seeing time and time and time again as men that consistently feed the dog and don't master it, their lives get ruined. You know, I don't even have to tell you, just go look at the headlines of the past couple of weeks. Men, you know, in prominent positions, what do you see? You see the dog getting loose, and an untrained dog is a liability to itself and to anyone it comes in contact with. And so I wanted to write this book to say, look, as men, we've got to get control. We've got to become more accountable. We have to become more responsible, but we've got to get control of this dog within us, because if we don't, we are setting ourselves up for failure.
Yeah. Is one of the reasons why you feel like we have a hard time controlling that dog or mastering that dog is because a lot of men are disconnected from our master. We're disconnected from our relationship with God.
Um, no, not necessarily. In theory, let me put it this way. So the answer is yes, but no in theory. So here's what I mean by that. I think that, you know, there are a lot of men who are, you know, connected to God, but like, let's say in the church, right? But they still fall, right? Men who know the Bible, know the word, can speak, can preach, can pray, have brought people to Christ, but they still fall prey to the ways of the dog within. What's interesting to me is that when I think about my relationship with God and really putting the master in control, you know, God being the master, what I see is like, oh, okay, submission, right? So if something is going to master me, it means I have to submit to it. And too often I find that as men, we repress so much and suppress so much of how we really feel, especially when it comes to lustful thoughts. We never submit that area to God. We never really submit that area to the master. So we know intellectually we have this intellectual relationship with God, right? We you know, we read the word, we do the devotional, we pray, we go to church, all of these things. But clearly that is not enough to stop a man who is feeding the dog from that dog running and ruining his life. So as men, one of the ways to really, I think, take our relationship with God to the next level is to give him every part of us, even the parts we don't want to acknowledge that are there.
Right.
You know, I mean, seriously, as a man, you can be like, yo, I'm in a relationship, I'm married, I love who I'm with, and I have these thoughts. God help me. Why are they there? Where did they come from? You know, and I think that because we don't submit those parts to God, then it's like we really got to take it to the next level if we really want to get a better relationship with him, and we really want him to have full mastery of our life. And in addition to that, too often, especially in the faith community, we think just giving it to God is enough. God has given therapists great knowledge. God has given authors incredible knowledge about men and women. If you are a man and you want to do this work, you got to commit to it. You may have to get a therapist. You're going to have to read some books. You're going to have to get a support group. You as a man, me as a man, I can't do this by myself. I cannot. I have a whole team of people that I talk to consistently so that I can be honest about the work that I have to do. If I sit up here just because I'm DeVon Franklin, whatever that means to anybody watching right now, if I take that idea, oh, I'm DeVon Franklin, you know, oh, I could never fall prey to the dog. Are you crazy? Yes, I can. The moment I say I'm not gonna follow, the moment count, pull your watch out. You're gonna know. It's about 2 minutes. It's gonna happen. So it's important to understand this work is spiritual, but it's also practical.
So I had a question because when reading the book, I know you're speaking from a male's perspective, but do you feel like women can also experience the dog per se, where you're speaking of it as lust, within themselves as well? And if so, do you feel
Oh,
like the process of them like the steps that you took as well, or any other man was to take, is the same?
Yeah, I do think that women, have the same thing, right? I do think that women have love and lust in them clearly. And one of the reasons why, if I had to do it all over again, I probably would have called the book "The Truth About Men and Women," because the reality is that women have this same issue. It takes two to tango. When you talk about how much infidelity there is, and all of this takes two to tango. So it's not just men out there, having these lustful thoughts and issues and feelings and acting on them. Clearly, there are women that are doing the same thing. Right. And so I've had women that read the book and they say, DeVon, as much as you're talking to men, you're talking to me. So, it is true. And I think that any person has to get control of lust, and understanding that the lust that you have, the lust that I have in me, it's not a reflection of how close you may be to God or not, or I am to God or not. It is a function, I believe, of, when David says, I was, born in sin and shaping in iniquity. When you look at the power of sin, on the world, maybe that disrupted how we operate, right? So I think that any woman, needs to acknowledge, okay, I do have this lust in me, and I want to become the love in me. I want to master this dog within. And I can tell you that those principles in the book, if you are a woman and you read this book, it will transform your life. It will, because, women are able to, again, it's like when you look at cheating, like why do most divorces end? A lot of times it has to do with cheating, infidelity. If a man stepping on his marriage or a woman stepping on his marriage, whoever he's dealing with, 9 times out of 10 knows that he's married, right? Or knows that she's married, right. But the choice to still, hang out is still made. So I believe that choice a lot of times does come from lust. But here's the other thing that's very important. And this is why these issues are so complex and really important to think about and to focus on, because when it comes to safe, I have a whole chapter in the book about protecting your yard, safeguarding your marriage, your relationship. This is very important, because when your basic needs are not being met in your marriage or your relationship, whatever need is not being met becomes a liability to the marriage or relationship, because you may not even realize, if your need is not being met, you don't even realize how someone else can be set up to come in and meet a need that you didn't even know. So let's say you have a need to communicate in your relationship and the communication is not great. And then all of a sudden you find yourself, at work, and you're communicating with someone with the opposite sex, and something in you says, ooh, this feels so good. Right. I just get a chance to talk. Oh my goodness, right? Why? Because I can't do this at home. Exactly. And then that becomes, it's like, oh wow. So my lust for conversation, my lust to feel heard, all of a sudden I'm getting it met outside the marriage or the relationship. What do I do? And that becomes a liability. So it's so important to just be honest, men and women, about, hey, here's what I'm feeling, here's what I'm thinking. Let me be honest about this so I can figure out a healthy way to deal with it.
Right. Do you have, because you spoke on this a little bit earlier, which I think is very important. It's not suppressing your urges, but actually talking about them. So if you're going through a situation like that, where you feel like somebody else outside your marriage is filling that void that you always wanted in your relationship, how do you go to your partner and explain that to them in a way where it doesn't hurt them or anger them?
Okay. All right. Now we're having a very interesting conversation. Okay. Okay. So here's the nuance. Here's the complexity. This idea in love, right? That you are my everything, right? We've heard songs about it, oh, you're my everything, you're my everything. This is a myth. No one can be everything to someone else. The only person that can be our everything is God. That's it. Yep. In my marriage, I cannot be Megan's everything. Megan can't be my everything, because there's just no way that one other person can do every single thing at every single moment to make someone else happy, because I also believe that you can't make somebody happy. Each person has to be accountable and responsible for their happiness. And then you share that happiness with the other person and you contribute to that person's happiness. But I actually don't have the capacity to make somebody happy. I can help, I can contribute, but I can't actually make it because that person has to be responsible for making their happiness. Right. So here's what happens. Why is it important to poke a hole in the myth that you're my everything? Because if you feel like your needs are not being met, that's one thing. But it gets compounded because you have an expectation that, oh, my spouse is supposed to meet this need. But you haven't even asked your spouse, can I have this expectation of you? So I have a need. Let's say, go back to communication. I have a need. I want to talk a certain way. I have not asked my spouse if they have that same need for communication or if they can meet my expectation when it comes to communication. I haven't asked them, but then when they don't communicate with me the way I want to be communicated with, I get mad at them. But I haven't even talked to them about the disconnect in communication. I just assume, oh, well, if you love me, you would know you're supposed to communicate a certain way. Right. But you have two different people who are coming from two different backgrounds, two different upbringings, two different understandings of what communication is. And it's ludicrous to think that the other person is going to know what your expectation is around this issue. This is why it's critical. You got to have the conversation with your spouse. I have this need for communication. Here's my expectation. Can you meet it? Get your spouse to say, you know what, I can. Or they may say, babe, I don't know if I can do it that way. I mean, I can talk, I want to talk, but I don't know if I can meet that need. Okay. Here's the thing. So you're talking about, when you're having other conversations. If you're having a conversation at work and that conversation starts to feel good, you first have to step back and say, oh, got it. I have a need for communication. This person that's not my spouse is communicating with me the way that I want to be communicated with, but let me not mistake that for love. Let me not mistake that for anything romantic. We just happen to connect and have a similar way to communicate. That feels good, but that's not my spouse. So this is why it's complex, and there's a nuance here where you can acknowledge, okay, you know what? I enjoy speaking to this person, but I am not going to put myself in a situation where I mistake what that communication is and what's actually happening. Because if I do that, then I will find myself on the other end of an affair, and I don't want to be there. Yeah. So a lot of it has to do first and foremost with understanding what you can get from home and what you can't get from home. And that can only come through talking about it, setting your expectations, and getting clear on what is possible in your marriage or relationship and what isn't. Yeah. It has to start there.
Yes, I'm loving this conversation already because I feel like you're speaking our language, because that's something we talk about a lot. Is how unspoken expectations can really ruin a marriage. If you're expecting something from your partner and they don't know that you're expecting it from them, they can't really feel that, right? So one of the things that we love to tell people to do is basically fill out a job description. Like when you go for a job, you read the job description and you say, okay, this is what they want in that role. Can I fill that role? It should be the same way when you have a relationship. You need to sit down and talk about the expectations that you have for the relationship. Therefore, y'all can both see if y'all fit that job description that the other person is looking for, so you don't waste each other's time.
Yeah. Totally. I mean, my next book is all on this. It's all about expectations. It's all about setting expectations. It's called Live Free. Use the power of expectations to transform your life. The power of setting expectations to transform your life. I love this idea of your job description. That's great. That is absolutely great. I think it's absolutely right. Unspoken expectations are relationship killers for sure. And it's really important to get clear on what your expectations are, and to also have realistic expectations. Mm-hmm. I define a realistic expectation as something that's within my control to affect. So if I want to sip some tea, it's within my power. It's within my control. I can expect that. Now, if I sit here and say, I want my wife to pour me some tea and I don't ask her, I just say, that's unrealistic. Why? Because it's out of my control. And this is, we talk about marriage, you talk about relationships. This right here is where so much tension in a relationship or marriage is control. Everybody wants to control somebody else. Mm-hmm. The only thing you and I control are this remote and ourselves. That's it. That's it. Oh, that's it. Yeah. You don't control your spouse. You don't control your kids. You don't control your family. You don't control the weather. Mm. So we sometimes go drive ourselves crazy. We get mad, frustrated, angry because we're trying to control things that are out of our control. Right. So in a relationship, when you talk about, you know, job description and setting expectations, yes, let's be clear about what the expectation is, but also know that the only thing that's realistic is what you know you can control. Right. And part of that is also establishing your boundary. You can say, hey, look, this is what I need in a marriage. If you can meet that, great, cool, wonderful. If you can't meet that, let's talk about what that means. And let's talk, because my need's not going to go away. You know, so let's talk about how we navigate that if you actually can't meet that. But it comes back to the communication and definitely expectations. So I love what you're saying. I love that.
So going back to the dog, or less, if you want to call it, what were some of the?
She's gonna be saying dog all the time now.
So what were some of the steps that you took specifically to create that change and that shift?
You know, it starts with acknowledging that it's there. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, I mean, I was raised in the church, you know, been a Christian all my life. And, you know, there was no talk about how to handle lust, how to handle feelings, thoughts, emotions that are lustful. Never a conversation other than don't lust. That was it. Don't do it. Mm-hmm. Don't lust. And then, you know, go about your business. And so, you know, as a result of growing up in the church, and I'm sure that my experience was not, that it's not only my experience. I'm sure a lot of people have this experience, which is, you know, there was a lot of guilt and shame, you know, when these thoughts and feelings would arise. You know, I was like, okay, this is not of God, and what's wrong with me, and I'm terrible, and like literally, you go through this whole process of God. You just judge yourself. It's like, okay, wait a minute. And I got to the point where I was like, okay, Lord, when I look at history, when I look at culture now, when I look at my friends, when I look at men in my family, they're all there's a through line connecting all these men. They all are having a similar struggle. Okay, so then I'm not alone. Okay, so it started with acknowledging that there are these feelings, that this dog is here, and then the question for me became, what are you going to do about it? And then I looked at literally dog training. Mm-hmm. You know, when you get a dog, you know, you have to discipline it. Period. If you don't discipline your dog gonna tear up your house. It's gonna jump on your neighbors. People come over. It's gonna bite them. It's gonna pee on them. It's gonna just be a nuisance. Right. So I said, "Oh, got it. I want anyone that comes in contact with me to feel safe." The same way that if I had a dog at the house and someone comes over, I want them to know this dog is never going to hurt you. Mm-hmm. Why? Because I've disciplined it. Mm. It's under my command, under my control. So it came from a place of acknowledging and then looking at, how do I get disciplined? How do I get this lust under my control? So I am not being driven by it. It obeys me. Mm. And that became a process of reading books, of therapy, of honest conversations. You know, I mean, it's a process. And I'm not going to say that I've mastered it. Mastery is a lifelong process. Right. You know, I'm mastering it. I'm working on it every day. Mm-hmm. Because, you know, the same thing with the dog. Like, yo, your dog may behave today, but if you don't say, hey, sit tomorrow, mm-hmm. the same behavior or discipline that got you to today, if you don't employ it today, it may not be there tomorrow. So these were some of the things that I did personally in order to work on mastering this dog within. And one last thing I would say about it is I had to get rid of the guilt and shame. When we are feeling guilty, when we feel shameful, it's really hard to think the best for ourselves, to think the best of our life, to think the best of what God's plans may be. So I really had to say, okay, God, I believe that you created us for whatever reason this is in us. Let me do my best to work through the guilt and the shame that I feel when I have certain thoughts. Let me just acknowledge, okay, a thought is there, a feeling is there. Okay, it's there. All right. I don't have to act on it. I don't have to judge it. It's there. Okay, let it pass. And through this practice and many of the tips and tools I put in the book, I've been able to learn how to get control and to master this dog, because it's truly the work that we as men have to do.
Yeah. Another thing that you talked about that I really like, that I try to be open and transparent about, is you talk about how sometimes our fun as men can lead to other people's pain. And I think that, me growing up, me just thinking what it was meant to be a man, me thinking what it's meant to be a professional athlete, I kind of got caught up in that lifestyle where I was just worried about when I made it to the NFL, I just wanted to have fun. So I wasn't out here doing intentional dating. I wasn't telling women what exactly I was expecting from this relationship. I may have been playing it a certain way and they thought that I was taking them serious, but I had to learn to let go of my ego, right? And learn how to be more intentional about the relationships that I was building with people. Can you talk about why you decided to, focus on intentional dating and what vision God had gave you that made you go that route?
Sure. I mean, look, again, like, I think that in our culture, in our upbringing, we don't equip. We are not equipped for real success. Like nobody, when you are younger, talks about here's how you need to date. As men, as women, especially as men, right? It doesn't mean that as a man, even when you intentional date, and I'll get there in a minute, doesn't mean that you are going to marry the first person you date. It just means like, oh, okay, let me not go into the world with this sow my royal oats kind of mentality, or this, you know what, I'm just here, to what's the other word that people use? Like as a man, look, I'm gonna get as many notches on my belt or whatever that may be, right? Because as men, what happens is that from very young, we are conditioned to not think of women as women, but as possessions for our pleasure.
Yeah.
And as long as they no longer serve our pleasure, the same way when we got tired with the toy, growing up, you have your Tonka truck. When you were tired with the Tonka truck, you would put it down, not even think about it. You go get something else. And as men, especially, we are conditioned to objectify women at a very early age. So as we get into dating, it's not even a thought. It's just like, hey, either you're gonna do what I want you to do, or I'm gonna go find somebody who will.
Mm-hmm.
And so we all are guilty of, as men, I believe, of this objectification of women. And then we find ourselves, saying, oh, I'm a good man. Yeah, okay. How much pain have you inflicted? It doesn't mean that when you're intentional, pain won't be sometimes a consequence of that if it doesn't work out. But a lot of times as men, when I was dating, we didn't go into the situation being intentional, saying, hey, here's what my intent is. Do you share the same intent? Even if you are in a situation where you're like, look, right now I'm not in a serious mood. This is not what I'm looking for. I'm looking to casually have someone to hang out with, go to the movies with once in a while, talk on the phone, whatever. Like, are you up for that? Cool. A lot of times as men, we don't set the expectation in dating. We just want to get the woman, hooked, whatever. So then that way she does what we want, we want her to do at any given time. And like whenever we call, she's ready because she's thinking that there's more because we've manipulated the situation. So instead of becoming men, we become master manipulators. And so I found myself, even, as my teenage years, my 20s, I found myself 30s, I found myself getting into this pattern of still, yeah, great. I'm a man of God and all this kind of stuff, but it didn't mean that I didn't have times when I found myself manipulating women and dating for my own pleasure without a real concern for their heart and how they felt. And it wasn't until God gave me this vision that, I was at the altar, I was getting ready to get married. And the minister, before I said I do, the minister said, turn around. And down the center aisle were all the women that I had dated. But the thing about it was not only were all the women there, but they were cut open, they were slain. Literally, like just slashed open. And God said, do you think it was worth all of their hearts to get here? He said, don't play with my daughters. Don't play with them. And that moment really changed the way that I looked at dating. And I really said, oh, okay, I've got to be more intentional. I've got to be clearer about, when I say intentional, what are you looking to get out of your interaction with this woman? And communicating what you're looking to get out of this interaction. And I believe that as a man, when you talk about manhood, real manhood, it means being truthful and honest with integrity. And now listen, y'all know I wrote The Way with Megan, and I practiced celibacy for a long time. So I'm a proponent of that. But if you're a man and that's not the page that you're on, I would challenge you, if all you want is sex from the woman you're dating, tell her. Be intentional. You know what? This is what I want right now. This is all I want. Give her the option to say yes or no. You know what? I want somebody just to kind of hang out with. I don't want anything serious. Give her the option to say yes or no. Because too often as men, we don't do that. We don't do that. We'll get into a situation. We try to, use the smoke screen of being into them when we really have ulterior motives. So intentional dating is really about not having an ulterior motive, being clear about your intention, expressing that intention, and allowing the woman that you're interacting with to say yes or no, so that she and both of you can be accountable, responsible for what you both have decided to do or not do.
Yeah. And one of the reasons why I wanted you to talk about your vision is because when I heard it, it was so powerful to me, because I felt like I went through a similar circumstances, before I decided to take that step into getting married. And what happened was, like, during my second year in the NFL, I was going through a lot of stuff with injuries. I almost died from blood clots after, a back surgery. I had blood clots in my lungs. And my wife suggested that maybe we need to go back to church, that we're missing something for our life, and maybe we need to have a stronger foundation with God. So we ended up going back to church, and we got baptized together. We decided to take that journey together.
Yeah.
And after we got baptized, I remember sitting in the church one day, and me and Asher are sitting next to each other just like this. And the pastor walks up to me and he says, if you're not going to take her serious, then let her go. Stop playing with her. And that was it blew me off, because I was like, man, you could have pulled me to the side and had this conversation. But when
he put you on blast.
Like,
whoa,
yeah.
I love it.
When he said that, it was like the first time I was being held accountable. Like, if God's telling me, if I brought this blessing into your life, then don't play around with it, because you'll miss out on your blessing. And it was that day that I decided, you know what? I'm going to leave all the childish games alone. I'm going to stop being scared about committing myself in a sense where you're getting married. And I decided to just go for it. And it was the best decision that I did, as far as getting baptized and getting married, because like 2 months after that, that's when our daughter got diagnosed with cancer. And to see the way that we was able to work together to really overcome that type of challenge we were going through, was like God just brought us together. And it just made it even better.
Amen.
We was born on the same day in the same year. So I just felt like God just made us for one another. But it took a man holding me accountable before I realized the wrong that I was doing.
There it is. There it is. And as men, I think that every man that's serious about manhood should seek out accountability, as hard as it is. And look, it really saddens me, because there's as men, we're never taught to do that.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of times as men, we suffer in silence. Even when you have close friends, even when you have, good friends around you, you don't seek it out. Because you're either, sometimes as men, we can become afraid or, whatever. But I love that he held you accountable, and look what accountability produced.
Yeah.
And so I do believe in accountability 100%. And I'm a huge proponent that as men, we got to seek it out wherever we can get it.
Oh, yeah.
So I know we read The Way, of course, And we were discussing because a lot of our viewers asked about waiting before marriage, and we can't personally attest to that, but we just wanted to
I hear
know,
you.
as just being honest. But as far as with you deciding to go on your celibacy journey, like, was there still the struggle of what you said, going through lust and having a struggle of being celibate and trying to find your wife or whatever you were looking for out of that journey? Was it a struggle for you, and how did you handle that struggle?
Yeah, it was a major struggle. I mean, it definitely was not easy at all. The thing that helped me navigate it was a couple things. One, it was like, okay, you know, Matthew 6:33 says, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven and all its righteousness, and all things you worry about will be added unto you. And so, I really, really believed, like, okay, God, you know, this is the path. I'm going to be really trying to put you first. And I really, truly, and this sounds, it sounds, I don't know, it may sound fake, but it's the truth. Like, the reason why I started to be celibate because it was about, like, I really want to be right before God. Like, that's me. Like, I really, really don't, like, I want to be used to my full capacity. And if, like, okay, God, if I can't get any discipline in this area, is that going to be disruptive to the things you want to do in my destiny? And so, because those were my concerns, that was the number one reason that I was like, okay, I believe that if I sacrifice this area, that, because the Bible talks about, present your bodies as a living sacrifice, and look at Romans 12. And so for me, I was like, okay, all right, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And it was not easy. And there were difficult, very, very difficult moments, and, moments that, were tested my faith and tested my commitment for sure. Yet the thing that kept me continuously wanting to stay in it was I had this other vision, being at the end of my life. And God was like, DeVon, you made it, but here's what I wanted to do with you. But because you had no discipline in sex, here's all I could do with you.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally was like, man, if if my destiny and being everything God called me to be is directly connected to discipline in this area, then I'm gonna grit my teeth. I'm gonna fight, because I want to be disciplined in this area, because I want whatever God has for me.
Mm-hmm.
And that desire for God was the only way that I could have done it or even conceived of it. And I wasn't looking to find a wife or any of those kinds of things. I truly was looking to do what I believed that God wanted me to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I do believe that as a man, when you can get disciplined in the area of your sex life, there's nothing you can't do.
Yeah.
Period. There's nothing, nothing. I mean, if you can get disciplined there, then you can probably run or rule the world, because so very, very few of us do it. Very few of us even conceive of, why should I have less sex? Like, it's not even a thought for most men. But I'm telling you, for the men that want to become even better, look at discipline in that area. And that's what got me into it. That's what kept me into it. And that also had helped me in many other areas of my life, many other areas where, even now, in marriage, I have a foundation of discipline that came from celibacy that I think has helped me navigate marriage successfully.
Yeah, and you spoke about in that book. You really helped me, define a lot of things that I didn't really understand, especially when you talked about the difference between abstinence and celibacy. You
Yeah.
said that abstinence is refraining from sex, while celibacy is abstinence with a purpose. So when you and Megan met and y'all decided that y'all was going to take that route of celibacy, what was the purpose that y'all were seeking, and did you receive that purpose or reach that purpose before marriage?
That's a good question. The did we receive the purpose? I mean, I think we received the purpose. I mean, the purpose was, we believed that, we wanted to just do it the way that we believe God was calling us to do it. And then we felt like the purpose was, okay, God, we want to, lay this foundation. And if we ultimately are going to get married, then let's not rush. Let's not rush. Let's put you first. Let's just, be intentional about it. And so the purpose was really to lay a strong foundation for our marriage, for our union. And so when we got together, she was already, waiting, and I had obviously, been waiting. And so, waiting together wasn't easy. But, we did it with the purpose in mind of honoring God and really wanting to have a strong foundation for our marriage. And I do think that it has helped. I mean, you all are married, and, you're the first ones to say marriage is not easy.
Yeah.
And I'm the second one to say marriage is not easy. It is difficult. It's one of the most difficult things you can ever do is get married and submit and commit your life to somebody else. And so, all the things that we've navigated in our marriage, I think that having that anchor of the commitment around celibacy has really helped us whenever we've gotten really upset with each other, or really like, oh God, I don't know how we're going to do this. It's given us a place to come back to, because we're like, okay, we know how we did this. We know how we started. We know what our foundation is. Cool. Like there's that scripture that talks about the building the house on the rock or on the sand. When your house is built on the sand, when the storm hits, you're worried. Because if the wind blows too hard, this house is going down. But when you on the rock, you're like, oh, we good.
Yeah.
The wind can come, rain can come, whatever, we good, we straight. So if anything, I think the purpose of knowing our foundation is strong is really what we have achieved. And we're very grateful for that.
Now, I can imagine, because I don't know, like Asha said, that practicing celibacy is hard. So are there any boundaries that y'all put in place to make sure that y'all wasn't tempted? Like, was it like, we're never going to sleep in the same bed together before we get married? No making out sessions? Like, were there boundaries that you put in place that make it easier for you?
Yeah, we definitely had, boundaries. We talk about that. We call them triggers, so to speak, in the book. And so, yeah, we had to really monitor the making out. It was like, okay, shoot, I mean, for me, I had, she would say this, so I'm not speaking out of school, but I had a little more practice with, the celibacy and making out and all that stuff. So it didn't really trigger me the way it triggered her.
Yeah.
So we had to, find the balance there and pull back on that for sure. It was really, I would say that was probably the strongest area where we really had to say, okay, we know we have this passion chemistry. We've got that. We've tested that. All right, we got to just relax until it's time to get married, so we both can honor, our commitment. But that was the biggest area. It wasn't so much about hanging, monitoring how late we hung out or anything like that, because that wasn't really our trigger. So that's why, we say in the book, every couple has to determine what are their triggers, and every person has to determine what are their triggers. Some people may say, look, my trigger is if they come over and we're Netflix and chilling, it's a wrap. So, the moment they invite you over for Netflix, nope, can't do it. We can watch together from your house. I'll be at my house. We can joint view this thing.
Social
but
distance.
If I come over there, I know myself is going down, and I don't want it to go down. So I'm gonna put in place some boundaries, because I know how it is. You got to be honest with yourself for sure.
That's dope.
So, being a married man in the entertainment industry, I just want to know, like, how do you stay grounded in your faith and not be influenced by Hollywood? Because, Hollywood could be a little bit much. Yeah. So how do you stay grounded in your faith and in your relationship so that that's not an influence for you?
Sure. Well, I wouldn't say that Hollywood isn't an influence for me. I think that there are many aspects of the business that have influenced me in a good way. It's really about saying, God, help me discern which influences are important for the purpose you want me to fulfill, and which influences will contribute to my ego and contribute to things that take me away from you. That's been the area that I continuously continuously focus on, because, it's like, okay, my intent is I want to do God's will. Great. Wonderful. And then it's very easy, especially in this business when there's so many different opportunities and people coming to me for all different types of things, and movies over here and TV over here, and, books and all this kind of stuff, right? All these things that could be very tempestuous, right? What happens is that even when I'm well-intentioned, it's so easy to get off track.
Yeah.
It's so easy. Literally, like, there's a movie I've been trying to get made, and I'm very close to getting it made. And I found myself, the more that I worked on it, like, I was just getting so tense about it that I was passing that tension on to other people in the process that I have to deal with in order to get it made. And I stepped back and I said, oh, got it. This is not that God doesn't want the movie to happen, but I am putting too much importance on it. I am being influenced by my perception of what I believe this movie will do for my career, my life, my bank account, right? So those influences were the things that, it's not that the movie being made and people helping me make a good movie are the wrong influences, but it's the influence of me feeling like I need this movie to happen for me to be perceived a certain way in the public. And that influence was what God called me on. And I said, oh, right. Got it. You know what? I got to trust you, God. You will get this movie made in your time, how you want to get it made. Let me stop acting like if I don't do it, it's not going to happen. So it's this consistent communication with God, and checking what the Holy Spirit is doing, saying, okay, is this you, God? Is this not? Is this you? Is this not? I do that all the time. And anytime I'm feeling like this, 9 times out of 10, it's not God.
Yeah.
Not God. I'm under the influence of something totally different, of the enemy, wanting me to pursue ego and pursue power and pursue notoriety for notoriety, power, and ego's sake. And so it's a real process, daily, consistently, even sometimes moment to moment, to really resubmit. God, I'm here for you. You put me in this business. I didn't put myself here. I'm here to do a mission. God, if you call me out to do something else, I'll do it. It requires that. It requires that, because there's a passage I put in my new book, and it talks about that if you are like 1 degree off. So let's say a pilot, says, okay, I'm going to fly from here. I'm in LA. You all are in Houston. I'm going to fly to Houston. And they put in the coordinates and they're 1 degree off. Do you know by the time they get to where they thought was Houston, they will be like over, 60 miles away. So even that 1 degree. So the beginning of this year, hey, I'm all for God. I'm doing what God wants me to do. But I allow the wrong influences just to take me off just a little bit every single day. By the end of the year, I will be nowhere close to where God wanted me to be.
I love that.
So it's just, I really focus on it every day, every moment. Lord, not my will, but thine be done.
Wow. So we have 2 more questions for you.
Cool.
You spoke about a book that you have coming out soon.
Yes.
Can you touch on that a little bit more, when we can expect it, and what other projects do you have going
on? Yes. So the book I'm doing right now is called Live Free. Use the power of setting expectations to transform your life. This book is, of all the books I've written, this book, I believe, is the most timely, the most widely applicable, because all of us struggle with expectations of ourselves, expectations of who we're supposed to be in the public, expectations of who our family wants us to be, who our friends expect us to be, who are, if you have children, who your children expect you to be, who what you expect of God, what God expects you. We all are navigating expectations every single moment of every day. And so I really wanted to write this book to show we have to set expectations. And expectations that are set are basically expectations that are realistic, and expectations that at the end of the day, oh, okay, got it. I can do that. right? And they're communicated. Because so often, think about it. How many decisions are we making because it's what we think is expected of us, not what's really in our heart? Where we live, where we drive, where we go to church, what we post on social media. Think about it. Expectations are everywhere. And so I really wanted to write this book because I want people to live free. Our expectations create a prison for us, and it's time to break free. And I wanted to show every reader, here's how you set positive expectations for your life. And here's how you let go of expectations that are, if someone else wants you to live a life that you are not willing to live. Do you have enough courage to live the life that you want to live? Or are you going to spend the rest of your life living a life that they expect you to live instead of a life that's in your heart? And that's what this book is all about. It's all about, here's how you live free. Here's how you communicate expectations. Here's how you set expectations in a productive way. And here's how you release some expectations right now that are not serving you, but they're actually contributing to you never being able to live the way you really want to live.
I can tell you one expectation you can have, that we definitely gonna go get this book, because it sounds like something that we need in our lives.
Yeah.
Awesome. I love it. I promise you, it's man, the book is deep. There's 4 sections. There's the personal expectations, there's the professional expectations, there's the relational ones, and then there's the cultural ones. And so the book is broken up into 4 sections. So you really get a perspective on how to navigate each one of these areas in your life. In the relationship section, man, I'm telling you, it's crazy. It's crazy. I'm gonna tell you right now.
So our last question, of course, this is the Real Relationship Podcast. So we discuss relationships, the real, good, and bad. But how do you define real love?
um, okay. Real love, 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 love. Real love, first and foremost, starts here.
Mhm.
You know, I have to love myself. If I don't work on loving me, I probably will be terrible at loving you.
Mhm.
So real love starts with me loving who God created me to be. Period.
Yeah.
And when you go back to the word, you know, Ephesians chapter 5, everyone loves to make this whole, you know, big deal out of the scripture, you know, wives submit yourself to your husband. When you look at that verse, you know, the section about wives submitting to their husbands is about this long. The sections about husbands loving their wives is about that long. And so in that section, it says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church, and he gave himself up for the church. So we're learning something powerful about love. Real love is sacrificial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It means that when I love you, at times I will put your needs over mine. I am willing to sacrifice what I want for the greater good for what you need. And I believe that this love, and also here's the thing. So often, you know, we don't understand, like, loving somebody is not always about loving them the way I want them to be loved. It's about loving someone the way they need to be loved. Because sometimes we love out of ego. We love out of selfishness, right? We're not loving because we really want to love this person. No, we're loving with a condition. Well, I'll love them to an extent. I'll love them if you fill in the blank. But when you go back to what the word says, it's like, well, wait, Jesus gave himself for us, no matter if we were going to accept him or not. That's real love. There's no expectation of anything in return. It's sacrificial. So when you think about that, you know, and I believe, like, when I try to put that in context, it is hard, because so often, especially in relationships, you're taught, like, hey, I'll do for you if you do for me. You know, oh man, you know what? All right, look, I keep doing this for you, and you're not doing for me. Well, I'm gonna kick back. No, you know what? I love you. I love you so much that I'm gonna honor my love. Even if you choose not to accept it, even if you throw it back in my face, I'm gonna do what God has called me to do. And God has called me to love you.
Yeah.
Period. So at the end of the day, if God has other plans, he'll show me that, he'll show you that. But until of further notice, I'm gonna do what he called me to do. And he didn't call me to love you if you return the favor. He convicted me to love you because that's what he convicted me to do. That to me is real love. It's because so often we love like this. But to me, it should be like this. God, if you, because think about it, you know, when you got a job to do, you may not like it, but you know what your boss told you to do. This is what my boss told me to do. So I got to do it. Think about love in that way. This is what God told me to do. He told me to love my neighbor as myself. Got it. Okay. So guess what? No matter what you say to me, it's my job to love you. That's my job.
Yeah.
He took that question and killed it.
Okay, that was powerful.
Oh man, he killed that question.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we appreciate you being on this podcast. We know we wanted to do this interview to bless other people, but I really feel like I was blessed by everything you spoke about today. You know, just
Nice.
being able to have a man on here and really speak out the way that you do, it helps me a lot because, like I said, being able to have men in my life to hold me accountable, just like you're holding a lot of men accountable, it just helps us become better men. So I appreciate everything that you said today on this podcast.
Yes.
Oh man, my pleasure. And I love what y'all are doing, and my prayers are always with you. And just grateful for the opportunity, and continue to do everything you're doing because we need it. We need it bad.